The Sandy and Toddcast is a Mind Garden Media podcast in association with
Screw You, Todd
Productions.
Broadcasting from two very different yet magical places not found on any map. Get ready to discuss the strange, weird, ghostly, crazy, spooky, and odd things that take place around us each and every day. All while having a little bit of fun. This is the Sandy and Toddcast.
Everybody knows my love of cemeteries, my love of local regional history. I love the Civil War. I'm very fascinated with the Underground Railroad. And Dave and I have a seasonal campsite about 5 minutes from a little town. Actually, it's not even a town. It's a hamlet in central New York State called Peterborough. And I've always loved this little town. You go through it, and if you blink, you miss it. It's all basically centered around sort of they call it a square, but it's really a rectangle in the middle. It's 25 miles southeast of Syracuse. Syracuse where I live now is about 40 miles east of Syracuse. So it's a little bit closer to Syracuse than me. The Hamlet of Peterborough was actually founded in 1795. Garrett Smith's father, Peter Smith, for whom Peterborough was named, established his homestead back in 1804. It was originally Peterborough, as in Borough, but it was changed to its present Peterborough in 1894. Beautiful little hamlet. Absolutely love it. There's a country store. The rectangle in the middle of the town has a Civil War monument, and each year during the summer for a weekend, they have a Civil War weekend. We have been there. We didn't partake in a lot of the festivities, but we were actually there and enjoyed it. And everybody has just a blast. People come from all over the place. They also have a really cute country store that, my gosh, they have just about everything there, including ice cream, and they're done that. They have food there. You can go sit outside and enjoy it. Every time we go by it, you can see people sitting out there and enjoying it. It's sort of like the town regulars.
Right.
During the 1800s, Peterborough played a huge role in the Underground Railroad, which just fascinates me. It's now the home of the National Abolition Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame is located in the building where the very first meeting of the New York State Anti-Slavery Society was held in 1835. The building itself is from 1820. It was also the home of the Madison County Children's Home for orphaned and destitute children. The children were cared for in a home in the village from 1871 to 1926. But unfortunately, and I hate when this happens, the building was razed in 1938. I really, really wish I could have seen that building. I'm sure it was just amazing.
Yeah, wouldn't you rather put your time and energy into like saving historic buildings, not only for the building portion of it, but the story that that building was a part of? I mean, to me, that would be more exciting than hearing a ghost say hello on a recorder.
History to me is so amazing. We only learn from history. And when you get rid of the buildings and the places that were part of history, you sort of lose something in that. And it just makes me so sad to know that. It's just so unbelievable that a town like this, a hamlet like this, was such a center for things like the Underground Railroad back then. The Underground Railroad, in case somebody isn't sure, was a network of secret routes and safe houses established in the U.S. during the early to mid-1800s. It was used by enslaved African Americans primarily to escape into free states and up into Canada. So we are roughly 2 hours from the Canadian border where we are now. So if they made it that far, usually slavery in New York State was sort of outlawed in the early 1820s. Although, if you were either born into slavery before then, or if you were what's the word I want? If you were like, not an apprentice, but that kind of thing, if you were bound to someone, then you were still considered a slave. You could buy your freedom at the age of 25 in New York State. So it was still going on. So who helped these slaves? Well, usually it was white people who were abolitionists or people opposed to slavery. And sometimes free African Americans also helped them. A lot of African Americans, once they reached New York State and were free, they would stay in New York State and not move on to Canada because they were fairly safe there. They were fairly safe once they made it to upstate New York. Binghamton was a big epicenter. Binghamton, New York, huge epicenter for Underground Railroad. There were a lot of Underground Railroad stops in the Binghamton area. They would cut across from Binghamton up to Peterborough and then move on to Syracuse to go north. So private homes were and churches were usually used, and they were called stations along the route. Not all of them had secret rooms or tunnels. That's sort of a tale.
Right.
Some of them some of them were in barns. Some of them were in cellars or second floors of buildings. Some only had room for one or two of them, and they would have to stand in a closet, face to face with each other, but some were bigger. Some of them hid them in barns, other buildings, outhouses. Approximately 100,000 slaves escaped during this period, but millions more, unfortunately, never saw freedom. Not all of them were able to escape. It was very tricky to be able to get out of the Deep South. The Deep South, most of the slaves in the Deep South never had a chance. It was mostly Virginia, Maryland, Kentucky, sort of the border state slaves that were able to escape. Station masters, they were the homeowners, and they risked everything. By being conductors on the Underground Railroad, they risked their money, their homes, their livelihood. Therefore, there are very, very few actual records of stops on the Underground Railroad because you had to keep it secret. If people found out that you were a conductor on the Underground Railroad, you risked losing everything,
right,
and including your life. And so today, for the most part in New York State, we can only guess or assume from word of mouth that was handed down through the generations where there was an actual stop on the railroad. Some are a little bit more clear than others. Some actually did have hidden rooms that had different ways of telling, but most of them are just assumed. They're not for sure, which to me is just amazing. The fact that you couldn't tell anybody that it was word of mouth.
Of course.
It's just, just clues. We can only base it off of clues. It is very well known, though, that Garrett Smith and his family were strong abolitionists whose estate was a stop on the Underground Railroad. My belief is that they would hide the slaves either in the barn, or they also had a building next to it that they called the laundry. Both had 2 floors. And my thoughts, and I'll go into that a little bit more later, but my feelings are that that's where they probably were. So let's talk a little bit about the Garrett Smith family, because in my eyes, Garrett, his wife, his entire family are heroes. Garrett Smith inherited a fortune from his dad. He made that fortune even bigger through very shrewd business dealings.
I like him just because of his beard. Look at that.
Oh my God. That's
monster.
That's a Todd beard. You were getting there.
I was. And the thing is, if I could and get away with it, I would have the beard. I would skip the hairdo, though. I would skip that totally.
I don't want to say it like this, but men looked quite unusual back in the day.
Okay. Yeah, I don't disagree with you, but I think people in general kind of did, you know?
Yeah, I think they did. But Garrett erected various buildings on his estate, including a mansion.
My goodness, that's a good looking building there. In the South, they'd say, come and sit out on the veranda and have a mint julep with us.
That is quite the mansion on the homestead. The homestead is actually right in the middle of the Hamlet of Peterborough. You can go visit. I've been there quite a few times, and it's beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous. They've worked really hard to restore the barn and the buildings, and it's just amazing. So from this homestead, Garrett Smith and his wife, Ann Carroll Fitzhugh Smith, over the lives, donated an estimated $8 million,
wow,
which would be more than $250 million in today's current dollars to a spectrum of different reform causes. There it is right there. Now, that little building is not part of the estate. I have no idea. It's like the county land surveyor or something. They must have put that on there. I don't understand it, but that's the land. And it's just beautiful. Like, it's so serene. And it's changed a lot over the years. But now that's his wife.
I mean, come on. She looks a little weird, too.
They all did. For the time, we look at it now and we look kind of whack. I'm sure they'd look at us and think we were wacko.
Well, at least you.
Well, you too.
Yeah. No, not me. Not me.
So in October of 1835, Garrett invited some 600 delegates to Peterborough to complete the first meeting of the reconstituted New York State Anti-Slavery Society at the village's Presbyterian Church. That church is now the National Abolition Hall of Fame and Museum. And it's open on Sundays, and I have to get over there on a Sunday so I can actually go through it. I haven't had a chance to do that yet. I'm just amazed at the fact that, where I walk, there were runaway slaves and there was all of this going on. And I'll tell a little bit more about that.
When we had Christy Sumner on, and she investigates with her sisters and friends, and she made mention that when you walk in those areas and you see those buildings and you are part of that, it's hard to imagine that this stuff took place that many years ago. You're standing in a location that somebody else also stood in, It's big time.
I again, like we were talking about, it's very personal for me. Like when I'm standing somewhere, anywhere that I go where I know that history took place, real serious history took place that made a difference in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about the people that walk there, that live there. It just is a very personal thing for me. So among other things, Garrett Smith also resided here when he was one of the Secret Six Northern philanthropists who bankrolled John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry. We've all heard about that in school.
He
actually, yes, you did.
I did not. We never talked about that. No, really? No.
Oh
Harper's Ferry, isn't that a band from the 60s?
No.
Was that Harper's Bazaar? I think that's what it was.
I do believe Harriet Tubman was involved in that as well. So Smith was so active in the abolition movement and the Underground Railroad that African-American abolitionist Henry Highland Garnet wrote, quote, "There are yet two places where slaveholders cannot come, heaven and Peterborough." Frederick Douglass published this comment on the front page of his Rochester-based abolition paper, The North Star, on December 8th of 1848. Frederick Douglass, of course, the Black free abolitionist in New York State. The estate was a known stop on the Underground Railroad, and we'll talk a little bit more about what I experienced when I was there the several times that I've gone. They're probably going to call me a stalker if I
was just going to say, they haven't asked you to leave yet? Well,
it's kind of addicting, especially when you get responses. You get things going on. So it's kind of addictive. I'm not going to lie. So Garrett's daughter, Elizabeth Smith Miller, was an amazing woman herself. She lived on the estate with her husband for a handful of years, and eventually they moved across the street to the house on the green in Peterborough. That's Elizabeth, or Lizzie. And the house that they moved to right on the corner was one of two homes that Garrett Smith would give to the couple. Now, that is a gorgeous home. I would love to be able to get into that. One of these days, I'm just going to knock on the door and say, "Hey,
hello, my name is Sandy. Mm-hmm. Can I come in, please?
Can I check out your house?" It's absolutely beautiful, and they kept it up beautifully, too.
And those are the cops pulling up behind you. "Ma'am, step away from the house."
Pretty much. I'm just this close to it now. Elizabeth was very much involved in women's suffrage.
Is that real hair or a wig?
That's a wig. And was friends with both Susan B. Anthony and her cousin Elizabeth Cady Stanton. So not only were they abolitionists, but the whole family was involved in women's rights. And just as an aside, Susan B. Anthony actually spoke at a women's conference in my city of Utica. And I go by the building all the time, and I would give anything to be in that building, but I don't think I'll ever be able to get into it. But every time I go by, I tell Dave the same story that Susan B. Anthony spoke there. And Elizabeth is also credited, funny enough, with designing what would become known as the bloomer costume. We've all heard of bloomers. And so she actually designed the bloomers. And that sign is right next to the blue house in the Hamlet of Peterborough. So much.
She designed the bloomers?
No, that was Elizabeth Cady Stanton.
So she designed the bloomers.
Yep. She actually designed the bloomers. And they were called bloomers because the girl who brought them over from Europe, her last name was Bloomer.
Gotcha.
So pretty exciting stuff. The Garrett Smith estate contains several buildings, as I said, though not the Smith Mansion, unfortunately. It burned down in 1936. The estate was named a National Historic Landmark in 2001. That's the barn. And look at those are the original square head nails. How cool is that? Yeah, I had to take a picture of the nails because I was fascinated. That's the laundry. And these have been restored. I wish I had thought to put the pictures of them before they were restored because this is just an amazing transformation. That's the laundry. They do presentations when it's open. They're only open on Sundays, but they do presentations and things like that on the land. So we'll come back to the Smith estate after we talk about the cemetery because I want to share a couple things with everybody that I experienced when I was at the Smith estate. So let's talk about the cemetery. Now, Dave and I we're so weird. We just drive around.
Stop. No, he is not weird. It's not we're weird. You're weird. That's what it is.
He likes doing it too. He actually had a remote, he had to do an appearance tonight. And he texted me and he's like, I'm going to send you these pictures of the cemetery where these Revolutionary War soldiers are buried that I went past. And he gets excited about it too. He
does?
Yeah, he really does. I'm not kidding. Okay. So we were just driving around and we found the cemetery. And at first we didn't think it was any big deal. Then we realized what it was really like. So,
Do you mind if I get that? I know you're in the middle of your presentation.
Okay. Go for it.
Hi, Sandy and Toddcast. I know, that's what I'm telling her. Can I pass along that information? Okay. See you, Dave. Bye. So that was Dave. He says that he's not into it. He just wanted to put that out there. You're the weird one, and he really does not enjoy doing it at all.
Well, he knows I'm weird, but he sort of started to join me now. He joins me on these adventures now because you can't beat him, join him, right?
Right.
So
yeah, exactly. What is he going to do? He's got a couple of choices. He can either join you, he can divorce you, or he can start drinking heavily. So I think he probably took
he doesn't drink. So he's probably going to be our DD on that Friday night. He's going to drive all of us home. We're renting an SUV. And so we can just pile bodies in. And we've been together like 20 years. So divorce is kind of out of the question, especially, now.
Yeah, because you take half of everything he's got at this point.
No, I wouldn't. Well, I don't know.
Yes, he would.
No. All right. Let's talk about the cemetery, though. So it's very cool. The cemetery is very cool. It was established in 1805. Notable graves include the Garrett Smith family and several Civil War veterans and freed slaves, along with other prominent families in the Peterborough area. Garrett Smith, when Garrett Smith died, he and his entire family requested no big stones, no big memorials. That literally is his gravestone. And his birth and death dates are engraved on the side of the stone. That's it. They're all very nondescript. There's not much to them. I love that they put the flag there every year for him. And his wife, Anne, and the children are all buried around him. There's 2 rows, but there is no big monument. There's nothing out of the ordinary. And I think that's a testament to the way they lived their lives and the things that they believed in and their
Boy, wouldn't it be nice if there were more people like that these days? That would be so nice, wouldn't it?
They truly are heroes to me. And both of them are inducted. Anne and Garrett are inducted into the National Abolition Hall of Fame. So it's pretty amazing. But that's not the only part of the cemetery. There's 2 sections to the cemetery. There's the very old section. And then in the back, there's newer graves. And a lot of times people they get very interested in the old stuff. They don't check out the back. But if you go there and you go to the back, there are so many war veterans buried there. It is such an honor to go and check out some of the graves from, World War II, Korean War, all of them. They're there. And it's just really, really nice. I thought I mentioned that because a lot of people forget about the newer graves and the history that you can learn just from going to newer
Absolutely.
graves.
Yep.
There's an entire area of the cemetery when you first drive in that has unmarked graves. My assumption from what I understand is that they are all African Americans. I'm sure they were free, but again, even in New York State, not everyone was treated as a quote free person.
Yeah, we still don't treat everybody the same. So
we don't. And it wasn't like they had their lives, their lives weren't amazing afterwards. They were helped a lot, but not all of them were helped a lot.
Right.
So I just want to share a couple of stories with you guys about two freed slaves who actually have headstones. And the reason why they have headstones is because every year, the Hamlet of Peterborough, they just did it this past weekend, but I had the investigation, so I couldn't go. I was so bummed, has an Emancipation Day. And they all gather at the Smith estate, and they walk down the road to the cemetery, and they have this huge ceremony, and they lay a wreath at Garrett Smith's grave, and they lay wreaths at these two slaves' markers. The slaves did not have markers until 2017 when a very, very nice woman donated the markers to them. So now every Emancipation Day, the crowd walks down and they lay the wreaths on Maria Howard's grave. And I want to tell you guys the story of Maria Howard because it's pretty amazing. Her headstone says Maria Howard died February 17th, 1869. And it actually says, born into slavery, died a free woman. Ms. Howard's story, she died at the age of 50 at the residence of the Reverend William F. Bridge, who was the last minister at the Free Church of Peterborough and at the same time, principal of the Peterborough Evans Academy. Reverend Bridge conducted Howard's funeral. She was one of 37 slaves who were owned by Elias Creswell of New Orleans and freed by Garrett Smith in 1852. She was also one of the last of 17 who came to Peterborough and then apparently lived in other towns in the area, including with the Daniel Dorrance family in Vernon, New York. Now, Vernon is only about 15 minutes from where I live here in New Hartford. So that's pretty cool. The other grave is for Thomas Jefferson Potter. He died June 17th, 1843, and his also says born into slavery, died a free man. Thomas Jefferson Potter was born a slave about 1816 in an unknown place. There were no records. So if they didn't know where they were born, nobody else knew where they were born, unfortunately. Some didn't even know how old they were. His freedom was later purchased by Nasham Goodsell of Clinton, New York. Clinton, about 5 minutes from me. That's how close to home these things can hit. And he also paid for Mr. Potter's education, which is absolutely amazing. Mr. Potter later moved to Peterborough and passed away on June 7th, 1843. His obituary confirms his attendance at Garrett Smith's Manual Labor School. His funeral was conducted by the Reverend Abel Schofield. So Garrett Smith actually had an academy or a school to teach freed slaves, to educate them on how to have skills. So that's how they're all intertwined so much. And I wish, my hope, my prayer is that someday each and every one of those unmarked graves would have a stone. I think that it's wonderful symbolism to give to Ms. Howard and Mr. Potter. But I think it would be wonderful if they could all get the respect of having a marker on their grave. There are also several Civil War veterans, including John H. Graves. He served in Company E of the 117th New York Infantry from 1862 to 1863. Patrick Rich, who served in Company F, 157th Regiment of the New York SV, and I'm not sure what that is. SV, I'm not sure. Franklin Mason, who served with Company F, 157th Regiment of NYSV, and John Hall, who served in Company B, 26th Regiment of the Colored Troops. So that in and of itself shows you that even during the Civil War, when you served with the Union Army, you were still segregated.
Yeah.
Which we all know that the Civil War wasn't really about slavery. It was about the economy. But still, there's some beautiful markers in this cemetery. And it's so beautiful. And I don't think it gets too many visitors when it's not Emancipation Weekend. That is my favorite one in the entire cemetery. That is in celebration of the life of William Edward Warner. Mr. Warner was a farmer in nearby Fenner, New York, and he was the father of 12 children.
Listen, the guy was busy. He was milking cows and
I'll say doing a lot of fun stuff.
If that's what you're into, I guess, right?
Very, very old stones in here. Very, very old stones. It's one of my favorite cemeteries, and I go to a lot. One of my favorites that I visited. So, and it's very peaceful. It's right next to a farm. So there's no houses close by, and you can just kind of hang out there and get an idea of what it looks like. So that is the Peterborough Cemetery. That is a little bit about the Hamlet of Peterborough. And I just want to end it, and then we'll talk about my visit to the estate. But I want to end it with a quote from Garrett Smith. "We must continue to judge slavery by what it is, and not by what you tell us it will or may be." And I love that. So that is Peterborough, New York, and the Peterborough Cemetery. I just really love the fact that I'm literally 5 minutes away from all of that history.
Well, here's the thing. I think you're right. I mean, you've talked a lot about how New York has all this history and stuff like that. I think all of us, if we took some time to learn the history of where we live, a couple of weeks ago, Lisa, our good friend Lisa Hale, took me on a cemetery tour that they were having. And not only did we learn, this particular one was about leaders in the community. We found out a couple of things. A lot of people who came to this town, Oshkosh, Wisconsin, were from New York and Vermont. And but we found out a lot about some of the families. And when you drive the streets, there's certain streets, Sawyer Street and this street and that street and all this. And then you find out their involvement in the community and where they're buried and all that kind of stuff. You can find out a lot by walking outside your door and being a part of what goes on around you. Now, I'm the first person to tell you, I don't like people. I'm not going to reach out. I'm not going to hang out with people.
Right.
But I do love the history of this city and the fact that it's named after Chief Oshkosh, an American Indian who, was part of the Menominee tribe, I believe, who led that tribe for many, many years. And the city's named after him. Things like that. I just think of really interesting. We can all learn a little something about where we live and the ties to history and the ties to where we are as a nation today.
I totally agree. Tammy said it perfectly. Be a tourist in your own town. And I say all the time, Dave's probably sick of hearing it, but people don't appreciate or understand what they literally have in their own backyard. And you can learn so much from cemeteries. There's a great website called Find a Grave. And pretty much me too. I use it all the time because a lot of times you go to these cemeteries and you can make out one name, like a first name or a last name, and you want to know more about it. Sometimes you can get not only the full name, what it says on the gravestone, but you can also get a little background on these people as well. That's where I found out about Mr. Warner and where he was from and that he was a farmer, that he had 12 children. It was on Find a Grave. I highly suggest if you go check out a cemetery that you should start there, and you can learn so much about your history, what went on in your town. It doesn't have to be incredibly historical. It can be a newer town, but there's so much that goes on. Life is just unbelievably cool and amazing when you learn other people's stories.
Yeah. And I think that, one of the things that I thought was really cool on the tour was we were seeing where people had gone out and cleaned off the stones because, as you know, marble does not weather well, and it usually gets the mossy kind of stuff on it. And there's some things you can do to clean that up. And when families are gone and nobody's there to care for those graves anymore, they can get in really rough shape. And some people to give back to the community, to give back to those folks' memory. They may not even know who they are, or they may know of them, but do not know them. Take time to take care of the gravestones. And I thought, man, now that is something that I could get into.
Sure. Because it's very personal.
Absolutely.
It's very personal. You're helping someone. I go to cemeteries, and as a matter of fact, the two slaves, the freed slaves, their stones, before I took that picture, I cleaned it off a lot because it had a whole year's worth of, weeds growing up around it and things. So and it's a well-kept cemetery, but, little weeds grow up and everything.
Sure.
There was something on it. I cleaned it all off, and, it's a sign of respect, and It's a very personal thing. It's just something nice to do to pay your respects. And when I go to a cemetery, what do? Each and every time I cross myself, I say, in the name of the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit, amen, because I was born Catholic. It's just like in me now to do that. And I speak to them and I tell them I'm here with nothing but respect. And if there's anything they want me to learn, to send me in that direction. I've learned some amazing things about our history. So let's talk about my trips to the Garrett Smith estate. It's open from dawn to dusk, 7 days a week. But the only time that they do any kind of talks or that anybody is in the main house at the edge is on Sundays, which I prefer to just go and explore. And it's a beautiful piece of ground. And there's the barn there. And then the laundry to the right. Behind it, there's running water, which I'm sure is very conducive to the activity that I experienced there. The first time I went there, Dave stayed in the car with Spike, and I just kind of walked around. And I thought to bring out my recorder on my phone. So I walked around to get a feel of the place, and it's a wonderful place. And if you're within driving distance of it, you really should go check it out. They have a whole bunch of different signs that walk you through the idea of slavery, the Garrett Smith estate, all kinds of stuff. And so I was standing at the barn door, and I was asking for some sort of sound or noise to let me know that someone was there. And right after that, I got a thump. Now, these are well-maintained buildings, so the idea of animals scurrying around in them is low probability. And the sound that I heard was not, I'm pretty sure that was not an animal. You can tell the difference. I grew up in the country. I know when there's an animal in a barn. I can tell.
I'm going to get a T-shirt that says, I know when it's an animal in the barn, and you're going to wear it when you come here.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not wearing that T-shirt.
Yeehaw, I know when it's an animal in the barn.
But I do. I grew up on farms. I know when there's animals in the,
Don't tell me you did not grow up on a farm.
I did. I grew up on farms. My father worked on farms when I was a kid. Seriously. This
is the first time, and I've known her for my entire life. She's never mentioned this to me.
Yeah, I grew up on farms. And then I spent a summer on my cousin's farm, like chaining it. My big job was chaining and unchaining the cows when they would get milk.
That's a big job.
Milked. Yeah, I was a kid. So anyways, so I got a thump. So I thought that was really interesting. So I was walking around and I got to, can you pull up that picture of the laundry again for me, please? Right. So up on the top on the right, you see those two windows. And as I'm standing there, just talking, I've got my recorder going. As I'm standing there, I keep hearing this tapping on the window. And I looked all around me because there's not any trees like right there. But I thought maybe there's something hanging outside that's, it was a little breezy that day. I thought maybe it was tapping on the window. There was nothing. I looked, I couldn't see anything, but I could definitely hear intentional tapping on the window. Again, I don't think that a squirrel is going to tap on the window at me. So as far as energy goes, there was some energy. My theory on this is that it may have been some of the runaway slaves. That was my first visit. So I was very excited because I did get the thump. It was very a knock.
And I heard it. You let me hear it. I heard it. Yeah.
Yeah, you could hear it. And it was definitely an answer to, let me know you're here. So I know somebody was there. So then the following weekend, because I had to come back, we went back. And this time Dave came out with me. So this time Dave and I started at the barn, and we got this.
It says the barn now houses a large portion of an Underground Railroad exhibit. So do you see that in there at all? We have to come by sometime when it's open to see it, but we wanted to just say hello.
Dave, it was in there. It was in there. Thank you for that. Thank you for letting us know. And I don't know if everybody heard that, but there was a shh.
Let me listen to that at the very end or right before you start talking.
Just before I start talking.
Oh yeah, imagine that. She starts talking right when something good happens. Here we go. Listen again.
It says the barn now houses a large portion of an Underground Railroad exhibit. So do you see that in there at all? We have to come by sometime when it's open to see it, but we wanted to just say hello.
Dave, it was in there. It was in there.
Oh.
Yeah, I got it.
I heard that.
Yeah. Now,
wait a minute. Wait, stop. A ghost shushed you.
I don't know that they necessarily shushed me.
Oh, they did. That was in response to you.
Well,
but no, that thump was definitely inside that barn.
It was louder than the first one, and there was nothing. No animal was going to make that loud of a thump in there. It just wasn't. I mean, these are maintained buildings, and the reason I told Dave that it was in there was because he thought it was a cough, and he looked to his left to see if anybody was standing there, and I said, no, that was a thump in the barn.
And then the ghost went shh,
and then they shushed me.
They did shush you.
I haven't cleaned up the rest of it, but I did get more audio. But one interesting thing before we wrap it up for the night, one interesting thing was after that, we went around the corner to the side of the barn, and all of a sudden I felt like this female energy. And in my mind's eye, Todd, and this is probably the first time this has ever happened to me, like in the moment, because I get a lot of things that I see before I go on an investigation and things, sort of like little movies. This is the first time this ever happened to me in the moment. It looked to me like, in my mind's eye, a black woman, a small black woman, was looking around the corner of the back of the barn. And I said to Dave, Dave, there's somebody over there. She's over there. And we went over there, and I could definitely feel the energy. Like the hair on my arm stands up when I'm near energy like that. So I think that my thought process is they may have been slaves.
And we're probably interested in why you were hanging out there.
And like we've said 1,000,001 times, that they know when people are open. And so they probably gravitate towards people who are more open. So Garrett Smith Estate, I'm going to go back. We're going to go back again.
Of course you will. Dave doesn't have a choice.
No, and they know me now, so it's exciting.
Those poor sons of bitches.
I know. So anyways, thank you everybody for letting me give you that little history lesson about Peterborough. I was really excited to be able to do it because I just love history.
Until we see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.